All right, so the first thing that we want to talk about here is what this game is going to look like. Remember when I sort of did a overview of the project? We're really talking about I want to get a version 1 that we can say this is what it's going to start to look like. And I just wanted to go through some of the basic graphical elements and maybe even some of the logic elements so that we can be thinking about it in the same way and we can get excited about getting to a version 1 pretty quickly, like within a couple of weeks. I think that it would be reasonable. Let me pull this up. So before we do, let me just, because I showed this to my daughter and she looked at it and was like, oh, that doesn't look very good. And so, here, remember, we can do something a little bit more like this if we want, where it's like a graphic, like that as a game board. Or we could do something, cool where it's lots of different places. And depending on where you are on the board, you come just like in the academy where you have like rooms. You'd be going into different rooms. But the way that the game of life works, the actual game of life works, which is really just an inspiration for what we're doing. It's not like we have to be bound to this. But you start where do you start? Start here? I don't know. Start here. So you start somewhere. And you move along the board, right? And certain things happen on every square. And green is payday. And as you pass that, and you spin the spinner, and you move along. And then as you get kids or you do other things, you add to your car. So these are all little things. And if we wanted to, we could make it work exactly like this, or we can. We can make it really work however it is that we want it to work. So what I wanted to do, let's go back here and let's take a look at, from a programmatic perspective, what I did was I created an array. I'll show you this in a second. So here's the CSS, right? And all I really did, I think, was I created these squares. It's 50 by 50, 50 height, 50 width with a border. And I said when you hover over it, it changes. And then I'm using jQuery so that I don't have to do like a body on load or anything like that. When the document is ready, it runs this function, generate board. And you see right here, generate board, game board. It's just a simple for loop, which says as long as it's going to start with I is 0, I is less than 100. Ticks up, and then it's going to just keep creating this thing, which says it's going to create a div with a class of game square, and then it's going to just put the number inside of it. Now, here's the deal. If you haven't gotten to this in terms of JavaScript, then you can either use that as an incentive to get here in terms of the class, or you can look at it from the perspective of that you're more of the designer right now than the developer. Because we're going to need both, right? Because we need to decide how we want it to work, and then we need to program it. So there's always a place for you. Even if you're a graphics person, you don't know anything about JavaScript or anything about style sheets, then you could say work on some of the graphics. Or if you're a design person, you might just come up with the events. That's what I was saying when I introduced this originally. But the goal here, this is a board. Now it doesn't look the same as that other board, right? Where is that other board? It doesn't look the same as that other board, but this could be a board, and you move forward just like the other thing. Now, I believe right now I have this where when I click on one of these, it just tells me what number it is. But you can see here that I have a on click show square, and so my show square has an alert. All right, pretty straightforward, not very exotic. So now what I did was I put one with events. So I went back and did this. Let me see. I think this is the same thing. So I went back and did life board with events. And what this is it says, come over here. Let's take a look behind the scenes. I said I created an array of event squares and it says the name is Bad Break, the color is blue, and then here are the numbers on the board where if you go over that number, I want it to show blue, and then if you click on it, then this is the, the thing that happens to you. All right, so as you're walking through, I go, let's say I get a 6 on the spinner. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I come here, then whatever is on this, it tells me what it is, Bad Break, and then the theory would be this somehow affects me, either my money or my health or my opportunity to get a job or whether I have a job or it sends me back or forward. Whatever the rules are, we put in here, and that's our if logic, right? So you'll notice, if you got a hawk eye, you'll notice that right here, my life board said 56, and it certainly does have me on 56. It says blue, but it actually also makes number 5 blue, and it makes number 6 blue. It would make number 6 blue, except 6 is involved somewhere else. So that's a little bit, I tried a little programming, but I had to change it. That's no big deal. I'm just explaining why that might be the case. So let me see if that's there. That's with options. Okay, so this is just, I put in categories. So let's see, we'll click here to go to the spinner. We'll click here to see the other players who are playing. Activity log is kind of cool. Like, let's say somebody gets married. Well, we want to have a little thing that shows up that says, oh, Fraser just got married, or Fraser just had a kid, or Fraser just got a new job, etc. Then you have your ability to chat with the people who are playing, and then maybe you have your profile, like, you're a doctor, you make this amount of money, you live here, you have these kids, and this just keeps changing. Remember, we talked about that. All right, so let's go back a couple steps here. So life board with options, let's say. Let's look at color squares. So if I come down here, what it does is and this is something I had to change because of the thing I mentioned. So it generates the squares, but then it says if the number, so we check when it's cycling through and creating the squares, right? This is what we saw in the earlier programming was, let's go back here. For right here, life board, it's just a for loop with it doing a plus equals. It's just going to keep adding this 100 times, and then once I'm done, this is going to have 100 squares in it, my text one, and then I put it over here in the game board, right? Well, what I then do is I add those event squares, and I say right here, and I want to make it where I add this events, and event squares has the color and then the numbers, and so now what it does is it says it's the same for loop right here, but inside of it, it's the same for loop right here, but inside of it you'll see that I've added this logic. So now it says check for every time we run through, I want to look at the event square array, and if its numbers have inside of it the number that this square is right now on the board, then I want you to change its color. Okay, so that's how we go from having a blank, or all white squares to having them be different colors and having them be linked to a specific break. All right, so that's where if all we did was make it look like this, then we're right now ready to put colors on the squares, and we're ready to link them up with the events. Okay, so let's just take a look at some other styles to the board that we might want to do.